Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic, straightforward. Happy Friday the 13th. Let's do it. Who's the worst person you've ever met? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A former CFO I worked for. He was demanding and an a-hole to his employees. He had a policy where 3% raise was the maximum, and only if you did something to add value to the department. Came up with a plan to lay off about 70 workers with a sob story of, oh, we need to or we won't survive as a company, but then more than doubled the CEO and his own salary. He had a side business as well in which he leased his own employees back to the company for an insane upcharge rate. He used me as a patsy because I was being interviewed by a rival company, tried to frame me as a Benedict Arnold, claiming I was feeding info into the rivals, sued the rival and me, but said to me on the side, play ball or we'll bankrupt you. I did not play ball because they didn't have anything on me because it was completely false. It turns out the judge had a conflict of interest because she was best friends with the CFO's wife, which we found out in the course of the case, which is why it got signed off on to begin with. But then she had to recuse herself, and the case ultimately got dismissed. Most people I would never wish anything bad upon, but I sincerely hope this guy gets stage 4 prostate and colon cancer. That's me. The worst person I ever met was a former boss who would belittle employees and take credit for their work. It created such a toxic environment that many of us left, and it really made me appreciate the importance of good leadership. I was a military police officer in Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was tasked with the transportation of a prisoner to Leavenworth Prison. My superiors refused to tell me what the guy did and told me not to stop for any reason. I was accompanied by a special liaison, and he didn't say a word to me the whole trip and told me to shut up when I spoke to the prisoner. After drop-off, the liaison officer told me that guy R''d his 3 daughters over years, and the oldest of the 3 had come forward. The worst part is, I was on a detail patrol months earlier guarding the girls at the PMO before they spoke with the MPI. They were the most adorable and innocent little things I had ever had the pleasure to spend with. The reason why I wasn't told what the prisoner had done was for his safety. That sick tried to chat with me on the way to lockup. A guy who faked his death only to try and get me to pay for his funeral. However, using common sense, dead people can't send you messages because they're dead. He was actually alive and wanted some extra cash. My former friend Marcus, the most toxic, condescending, yet stupid, self-absorbed narcissist whom to feel validated in life could only do so by trying to knock other people down and build himself up. Enough was enough, and I finally sent him a novel-long text message explaining to him what I thought of him, thus ending our friendship. Everyone else in our circle felt the same way, and they all cut ties with him too, so now the loser is left without many friends. I met this guy in my first AFSC tech school. He was a horrible person. It seemed like rules didn't apply to him. Just turned 21 while in tech school so he could drink in the on-base bar and off-base. He liked to use this to pick up on underage women and give them alcohol so they would, well, get drunk and he could use them. He got caught giving an underage woman alcohol at the on-base club, but she took all the blame. So he essentially got a slap on the wrist while she got booted out. Reminder to everyone, don't in tech school, because the military won't keep you. While on his probation for the incident, he still ignored any and all rules, snuck off base, and moved on to the next underage woman to scam. He somehow graduated his tech school, didn't even make it 1 year before getting a dishonorable discharge for felony drug possession, use, and intent to distribute. I was only shocked he was in charge with R. Story time. Years ago, I went to my regular D&D game on my friend's rooftop, and it turned out he had invited another guy to join the party just for 1 session. He lived overseas, Thailand, and was just visiting but had played before back in the day. Turns out I recognized the guy from an expat bar frequented by the bad kind of expats. The ones who think they know everything, constantly criticize the country they now live in, etc. I ignored that aspect though. The guy might be decent. The game starts off and he's very much an old school player with some cool and odd ideas about the game, but he tries his best. More or less an NPC who'll get more a prominent role for 1 session. However, the afternoon wears on and he gets more and more drunk. Starts getting a bit nasty, trying to start fights within the party, acting aggressively out of game. It eventually gets too much, and he's asked to leave after offending a couple of people. He doesn't argue and just goes. The guy who invited him apologizes, we shrug it off and get back to the game. Cut to several months later, the guy's arrested in Thailand for beating and killing his wife on the front porch of her parents' house. He kicked her to death because she didn't want to have sex with him. Cops found him sitting next to the body, smoking a cigarette and apologizing. Later, he got killed in jail. Some piece of work. The guy I got my mom's cat from heard that a guy in town was trying to get rid of some kittens. He found out soon after that if they didn't get adopted, he was just going to feed them off to his Burmese python. Apparently, he'd already done that to the mother because she got sick and he didn't want to pay for a vet for a cat his kid had brought in from outside. Basically, his kid snuck the mama in the house against dad's wishes. The cat had kittens. They kept them just long enough that they were barely eating solid food. Dude bought an adult Burmese python but didn't have cash for anything else afterwards. And yeah, he wanted $40 per kitten too. I told him that was bullshit, and I was going to call the SPCA's cruelty folks right then and there. He said, fine, just take the fucking thing and get out of my house. So I found the kittens' homes myself and gave my mom the smallest one. Saw him on Facebook a few weeks later trying to sell the snake off. My younger brother, he just got arrested for DV assault too. My mom paid $20,000 to bail him out, and he's living with her and me while awaiting trial. He treats her and I like shit, and we both walk on eggshells around him, but she attacks me if I insinuate she's afraid of him. He literally told her last night, there's a basic level of intelligence needed to have a conversation with me, and your brain does not operate at that level. When I brought it up later, she attacked me for insisting he was joking. Not to mention, all the times he tried to kill me when we were kids and how he'd torture crabs in front of me to upset me. My mom's reasoning for why he's innocent of the DV charges is, I know my son, and he wouldn't do that. Stephanie with a PH, because she was fucking acidic. I hesitate when trying to diagnose someone a narcissist. The word is overused, agree, but not with this bitch. She seemed literally incapable of imagining someone else's viewpoint, much less equal to her own, even as a theoretical thought exercise. My first hint that I shouldn't move in with her was when she tried to sell her former roommate's virginity on her behalf. But I was 19, and she sounded so certain and scathing towards this girl that I barely knew that I believed it was somehow warranted in that situation. Then she bought me a car I couldn't drive and had to pay her back for, so I had no excuse not to move in with her. Then she tried to keep track of the money in my bank account and confront me when I wouldn't give her $50 for a hair straightener at the drop of a hat. Then she got mad. I forgot to check the mail on my way in one day, so she hid my car keys and got mad when I called a locksmith and successfully got into the car. She was never employed, but somehow was always so victimized by the series of worsening consequences of her behavior that no job was good enough to dig her out of the hole, stupid debt mostly. Somehow she could persuade relatives to help her so long as she was in school, so she'd enroll, take out loans, and attend for 2 weeks before she was too tired to keep going. She routinely bragged about tricking people into feeling sorry for her, like inviting people out to a restaurant, then showing up with a canned fruit cocktail because she couldn't afford to eat, so they'd be forced to politely buy her meal. She moved additional roommates in without telling us, who were actually super nice. We bailed almost immediately on the living situation, but they were very happy to get brunch with us months later and dish once they escaped. Apparently, she invited a stalker to live with them. The girl he was harassing was already a roommate, which culminated in him stabbing their gay roommate's bedroom door with a knife for being friends with her. He left the knife in the door as a warning. Anyway, these are just the highlights. She was petty and weird and selfish in pretty much every interaction. The trait I remember the most about her was how she could create this fantastic, unquestionable sense that you owed her whatever she happened to need, but that expecting her to reciprocate in any way, no matter how minor, would be like it kicking a rescue puppy with a broken leg. Like, seriously, it's effed up you even thought about it. Anyways, my ability to spot red flags is hella on point now, so at least I've got that to look back on, except for the $3,000 it ended up costing me to live with her and then flee for 1.5 months. Well, this story certainly resonates for reasons I won't mention, but yeah, people like this exist. A good friend of mine, and maybe even somebody I know a little bit better. But yeah, it's a hard road out there, co-parenting. My husband's ex-wife, she was emotionally and physically abusive and the most manipulative person I've ever met. He's a sweet, gentle, positive person and has his kids convinced he's horrible and doesn't help them. His alimony and child support give her more income than his take-home pay. His kids and her are literally the only people in the world who think he's a horrible person. He's terminally ill, and she's on a campaign to isolate the kids from him. Phew. Everyone else loves and adores him. She's pure evil on earth. I know the guy. John Baker. I became the interim VP and my supervisor at the college where I worked as an administrative assistant, a total narcissist and attention seeker, and could string together 2 coherent sentences in writing. He made me do all his work and then criticized me publicly if I made a mistake, no training. He supposedly had a PhD, but I researched his alma mater, and it was a degree mill who awarded correspondence course degrees. He was terrible to me for a year, but I needed the job, and it was an at-will position. The permanent replacement they hired was almost as bad. I finally cracked and left. My ex-husband, I could write a book about the awful shit he did to me and our daughter. We're both out of contact now. She's an adult and it's her choice. Aside from the constant cheating, emotional, financial, and sometimes physical abuse, he was a raging alcoholic who would slash the car tires of his friends if they slighted him. He slashed mine too. I could go on for days, but I'll just mention how he acted when my dad was diagnosed with dementia. When my dad hit his head and was taken to the trauma unit, he accused me of lying and cheating while I was in the ER with my dad on my birthday. My dad didn't even know where he was, and it was when he was officially diagnosed. We thought we were going to lose him. A couple of years later, he got fired from his job because he lied about a family emergency to leave early while supervising a project. His boss caught him getting picked up by his girlfriend, whom they knew was not his wife. What was the family emergency he used? That my dad, again, who had dementia, had escaped, and he needed to help look for him. The thing is, that actually did happen several months prior, and he absolutely did not help us look. He used such a scary and awful experience of mine as an excuse to be with his girlfriend with no remorse. He only got worse after I filed for divorce. The day my dad died, my daughter let him know as a courtesy. He loved my dad, at least I thought he did, and my dad loved him like a son. He responded to the text telling her to tell me that I needed to do his taxes. She blocked him and never spoke to him again after that. He followed this up with having his lawyer send my lawyer a nasty email, and I know he approved that communication to go out after he knew my dad passed. Then he brought his uncle and a few other people to our house to intimidate me the next day. How did I know? This was the uncle he used to do dirty work and scare people for him. He did not live at our house anymore. He lived with his girlfriend, so he had no business there. He knew he was barred from our house because I threatened a restraining order. He also had several cars blocking the driveway. I had no idea who was in those cars or why, so naturally I opened the door and asked him what he was doing, why he was there, and who he was with. He laughed at me as I sobbed in front of our house. Maybe is why he was there, and should have just let it go. But I was scared and super emotional. He recorded me and taunted me. When I cried that my dad had literally just died, even his uncle knew he was wrong. His uncle said, "What the dude?" and said he was out and left. I had a full-blown meltdown and panic attack for the entire neighborhood to see, and he just laughed at me. We had been married for 20 years. My father and some other men in my family, for example, my uncle cheated on his wife for multiple years without her knowing, then showed up to the family Christmas dinner with his mistress to introduce her to their kids and tell his wife that he got his mistress pregnant. Don't know how she didn't kill him. My father abused me and my siblings our whole lives and used to run away from us at least once a week. I hate my mom, but she used to run after him just so we would have a father. She forced him to come home every time. He's also a suspected pedophile, and although I won't go into detail, he did some very shady stuff. He effed over his first wife and got his lawyer license taken away for misconduct, which was never disclosed to me. To this day, he guilt trips me and my siblings for not talking to him. My grandpa's also a horrible person. She called me a bitch multiple times, abused me as a kid for the smallest things like playing too loudly outside, etc., and would yell at me for very unnecessary reasons. He also definitely used to abuse his kids, but it's something that's never talked about. I avoid contact with him at all costs, but he's still very controlling of my grandma and mistreats her in general. Not super in detail on any of them, but overall not a great bunch of people. Special mention, my friend's ex-situationship. He abused her in every possible way and got her pregnant multiple times, purposefully but in a sneaky way also. And then wouldn't support her through an abortion, but also didn't want to have kids with her or a serious relationship with her. Abandoned her on the side of the road multiple times in the middle of the night, which led to her getting assaulted by a random guy also.